Hello, my name's Tipper, and today we're going to be talking about Appalachian language. I'm using the Dictionary of Smoky Mountain English for reference for us to go over, and today we're going to be talking about words that begin with the letter M. If you're interested in Appalachian language, you can check out my playlist titled Appalachian Language for more information. The first entry in the dictionary is ma or maw. M-A or M-A-W, ma. I would say both the same way. But a mother used in third-person reference and as a form of address. 1929, his pa and ma has done give him up. 1931, Goodrich Mountain Homespun, ma wants you should go with her tomorrow to her aunt's in Tennessee. Let's see, all the way to 1977, Hamilton's Mountain Memories. She called her parents Pa and Ma, as most of the mountain children did, and she said, I didn't tell Ma because she is sick and it would worry her. So when I was growing up, I called my brothers and I called our parents Mama and Daddy, and my kids called me and Matt Mama and Daddy. Katie did go through a phase, I don't remember how old she was, and I don't know if she'd been watching Little House on the Prairie or something, but she asked me one day, said, would you care if I started calling you Ma instead of Mama? I said, no, I don't care. So she called me Ma for a while. You'll have to share with me what you call your parents. So this next one is really interesting. Recently someone actually sent me an email about it, and I had heard of it. I've never seen one, so I'll be interested to know if you've seen one before. And it's a madstone. Madstone, a stone or stone-like object taken from the stomach of a deer or other animal and popularly thought to be capable of drawing venom from the bite of a snake or rabid animal by rubbing it over the wound. So let's see, 1964, Wright, Mountain Medicine. But in spite of all the reports of madstones we heard while we were in the area, not a madstone did we ever lay eyes on. The descriptions vary. It was smooth and white like a marble. It was light and porous like a sponge. It was this and it was that. The most credible report was that it was the calculus from the stomach of a deer and was found rarely and held sacred by the lucky fellow who had one. If you were bitten by a supposedly mad dog, you sent for the possessor of the madstone, and he came and after dipping it into hot water, applied it to the bite. After application, it was returned to the water, and if it turned green, the dog was mad. Fascinating. It goes on to talk about it. Let's see, let's go all the way to 1975. Lunsford, it used to be, when they butcher a deer sometimes they find the madstone. This person who showed it to me said he had used it a number of times when a person had been bit by a mad dog. He would take it and turn that little place downward on the wound and let it rest firmly against the place where the person had been bitten. He said it would take hold and would remain there for some time, and they wouldn't allow anyone to touch it until it had turned loose and rolled off. He said they'd take it and put it in a pan of water, and the poison that it had absorbed would be soaked out and it would turn the water green. Interesting. I've never seen a madstone. I've never known anyone that had one, but I had read about them in books and like in the dictionary, so please share if you have more information about a madstone. This next one is one that's very common to me, and I grew up hearing, I'm sure I say it myself, and I can just hear Pap in my head saying it, but it's just Main, the word Main, M-A-I-N, and it means exceptional or excellent. 1937, Hall Collection, Townsend, Tennessee, he was a Maine hunter, so it just meant he was a really good hunter. 1939, Hall Collection, Cataloochee, North Carolina. He took after the turkey, had a Maine race down there till the turkey flopped up again, a big log, and couldn't get over it, and there they caught it. So this is turkey season right now, so that's for all you turkey hunters, I guess. That was Alice Caldwell Palmer that said that. So I can hear Pap talking about somebody and saying like he was the main driver for that company. He was really good and they really needed him. This is another one going back to the first one we started with, but this is about grandmas. So mama or mamaw. A grandmother, also a form of address, same as ma. It's telling us to go back and look at that one. But 1942, Hall Phonetics, a curious form is mamaw, which I heard a middle-aged man use in addressing his grandmother. 1962, Dykeman Tall Woman, what happened to Mamaw Moore? Martha asked as Lydia braided her hair. And then 1997 Montgomery collection, it was known to 8 consultants. So I grew up with a mamaw, so that's a word that's very familiar to me because I had a mamaw, Mamaw Marie. I don't know if I'll ever have grandkids, but if I did and I had the choice between granny and mamaw, I think I'd choose mamaw. The next one, kind of along those same lines, is man, a noun, husband, used often by a woman in reference to her own man or husband. 1956 Hall collection, Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I got married when I was 23. I was married in 1886. My man was 73-year-old when he died, and that was Sarah Cole. Interesting. So, and then it does have, that's part A, and then part B is to handle or to master. You can't hardly man that tough snake, can you? So that's just a different usage. But that one is, most often I've heard that one just in a teasing way. You know, talking about somebody, that's her man, or her saying, my man will do this, or I get my man to do that, mostly in a teasing way. But I still hear that one. Mannerable. If you're mannerable, I bet you can guess that one means you're well-mannered. Hans Hawks Dunn, he was always mannerable toward Tiny. I couldn't help but take note of it. I've never heard anyone say mannerable. I'm not familiar with that one at all. Manpower kind of goes back, this definition kind of goes back to that second one of the man that I shared. To move by brute effort. Wagonin, by the way, often meant to chop a fallen tree out of the road and then with hand spikes to manpower it out in the way. And that was from Horace Capart's Our Southern Highlanders. 1952 Wilson folk speech, to employ the force of man. I don't know whether I can manpower this boat against the current or not. And 1974, Fink, Bits of Mountain speech, to move some heavy object by human effort. We'll have to manpower them logs up. Matt would tell you that he manpowers every day. He manpowers every day, moving this or that, setting something up. And this past week was a flagpole they had to help set up. Of course, moving desks, moving tables, and moving all that kind of stuff as a maintenance man. So he uses manpower a lot. A mantel shelf is the shelf over a fireplace. See, I can't believe that one's not just, I mean, how could that one even be noted in here? I thought everyone called that a mantel shelf. I don't know. But 1913 Capart, Our Southern Highlanders, the narrow mantel shelf holds pipes and snuff and various other articles of frequent use, among them a twig or two of sweet birch that has been chewed to shreds at one end and is clearly discolored with something brown. This is what the mountain woman calls her toothbrush, a snuff stick. So he's noting that in those days it was common for mountaineers, because they didn't have access for toothbrushes, they would use a birch stick, sometimes a black gum, mostly I think birch, chew the end of it, and that was their toothbrush. They could dip in soda, baking soda, or salt, and also, as he noted, it was also used with snuff to kind of tap the snuff down in your mouth. This one's really common in my area. Many-a, it's kind of a usage instead of a word, but many followed by a singular noun that is construed as plural. So 1939 Hall collection, Chestnut Branch, North Carolina. I've split rails many a day, carried them on my hip, and my hip would be so sore I couldn't hardly get my dress on. And that was Zilphy Sutton that said that. Hazel Creek, North Carolina, looked like it was raining down in the country, and no rain up there many a time. So that one's just so common to me. It's hard for me to believe that everyone doesn't say that. Thinking of Hazel Creek reminds me of a story that I heard one time when I went to one of the decorations over there, and I was riding one of the buses the Forest Service provides to take people into the back country. Somehow I got separated from Corey and Katie and Matt, and they wasn't on the same bus I was. But anyway, I was sitting by this older gentleman, and he wasn't really talking to me. He was just kind of talking to himself, and he was remembering. That's what you could see. He was remembering the times when he lived there. That's where he was at when he was a boy. But he said, to himself, said, I lost many a toenail running down this road when I was a boy. So that mention of Hazel Creek reminded me of that. Here's another one I've never heard of, a maple orchard. Of course, you can kind of tell what it is, a grove of sugar maple trees. but I've never heard anyone even reference that one. A mare's tail, I bet you've heard that one. A noun, a thin streak of white clouds. 1931 calms along southern highland. Judging from them mare's tails, it looks like warm weather. So if you see mare's tails, it's supposed to be warm weather, according to that. 1966, Dare, long trailing clouds high in the sky, and that was in Spruce Pine, North Carolina. There's a whole series of Marion, which is, you know, Corey just got married, so I have to pay attention to those. A Marion is a wedding ceremony. 1962, Dykeman, tall woman. Young'uns always have one thing or another ailing them, but a Marion don't come along but once in a coon's age. So that one reminds me of, you'll hear people, there's a Marion, but you'll also hear there's a burying. I seen over at the church I come by and there was a burying going on. You'll still hear that one fairly often. If you marry somebody off, Matt's always teased the girls about waiting for the day he could marry them off. It just means of children to get married and leave their parents. She lived over there with her and her mother and father. They'd all married off but her. So that one's, Matt has always teased the girls with that one. If you marry up with, it just means to get married to. And then this one I found really interesting because I just did the video a few weeks ago about the little winters of Appalachia. Here's another little winter that I didn't know about, a martin winter. 1995 Montgomery collection, a frost or freezing spell in early May at the time that martins arrived from the south, and that was Cardwell that shared that. So for us, I see a big crow flying over me. I love crows. But for us here, that last little cold spell we call blackberry winter. My blackberries are just about to bloom. They're not bloomed yet. And it's, you know, almost May. So that'll probably be our last cold spell. But that's interesting. I did not know about martin winter. That's a different little winter that I'd never heard of. This next one is really one that I grew up saying, and I use it all the time, and it's just how I say stuff. But mash, we use mash as a verb to press down hard, flatten, or squash. So 1939 Hall collection, Smokemont, North Carolina. Old man Tom went back to his pen trap, had about 2-year-old bear, and he said he had him mashed down flat so he couldn't get up on his feet to raise the lid up. See, that one I don't think that's a good one to explain how I would use it. Let's see. 1973, Great Smoky Mountain National Park. We'd hunt and get us a big heavy rock, wash it off right clean, see, and put it on the plank, and that would mash it down in below kraut, and that's how we would have, you know, the kraut and pickled beans. So, that is, I would use it that way too. But it reminds me, I think it was Bob Dosmer told me when he first come to Brasstown, that was one of the things he noticed right off, is that instead of saying push or press, that people said mash. And I remember 2 or 3 years ago, I was like at a doctor's office over in Blairsville, and I was checking out, and the lady, the receptionist, was having a hard time, and I could tell by how she talked that she was, you know, from the area. But then she said, I keep mashing it and it just won't work. Well, what she meant was she was clicking, you know, with the mouse. But it made me smile because it made me feel at home, you know, because she said mash. So I use that like that. Instead of saying push, I say mash. I'm one of those people. So that one's still alive and well. There's mast. All you hunters I know what mast is. A season's accumulation of fallen nuts, seeds, berries, and similar fruit of the forest, forming the natural diet of bears, wild hogs, and other animals. So Matt's always worrying about the mast. He'll start just as soon as the trees start putting out their leaves, worrying about the acorns, how many acorns there'll be this year, thinking about deer hunting. So I'm sure you that hunt are familiar with that. 1913, Cape Art, our southern highlanders, but the mast, such as acorns and beech and hickory nuts, is mostly on the Carolina side. So that was mostly, I guess they were talking about the Tennessee side or the Carolina side. I mean, that's in reference. It's in the Smoky Mountains, whether you're on the Carolina side or the Tennessee side. 1915, Bohannon bear hunt. In all the creek bottoms there was no chestnut mast, but of beech there was plenty, both in feeding grounds which lay on the North Carolina side of the main ridge and the line grounds which are on the Tennessee side. Again, referencing the sides. Hall collection, 1953, Bryson City, North Carolina. Sometimes we'd have mast in the head of Bone Valley and we'd hunt back that way. There's no mast on that side of the mountain except some beech mast. So they're actually differentiating between beech mast, chestnut mast, and hard mast. Mostly I just hear it all grouped together when Matt's talking about it. The next one is kind of goes back to that main one. It's kind of similar, but it's master, large, powerful. And it can be, it's not just referencing people though, it also referencing, like here's a good example, 1913 Cape Art, our Southern Highlanders. That Nantahala is a master shut-in, just a plumb gorge. Well, it is a gorge if you've ever been through the Nantahala Gorge. And boy, I would have liked to have seen it then. When did I say that was? 1913? Oh man, wouldn't you have liked to have seen the Nantahala Gorge at that time? That would have been something. Just the wildness of it. I mean, it's pretty wild now. It's parts of it, but you don't access driving through the middle of it on a blacktop road and seeing the rafters and all the rafting congestion that comes with it. But man, wouldn't that have been something to see at 1913? And it is a beautiful place if you've never seen the Nantahala Gorge. It's beautiful. 1939 Hall collection, Cataloochee, North Carolina. They'd come buyers in here. When the buyers come in and bought them, talking about cattle, before they left, they was a master drover too. That was Steve Woody. 1940 Sims collection just says master means great or big. How I like this one, 1962 Dykeman, tall woman. By the sound of him, he's got a master set of lungs too. I like that one. You know, there's lots of people that can sing well, and I love to hear, but there's some people that just have this, it seems like they barely open their mouth and this sound just comes out. It's just an amazing. So those people have like Dykeman was saying, a master set of lungs. A mattock, if you're familiar with a mattock, is a noun, a hand tool with a head shaped like an axe or pick used for chopping and digging plants. Hand tool used for cutting underbrush, that was Dare, and digging out roots. That was Brasstown, North Carolina, 1968. So the mattocks are still in use in Brasstown all these years later. But that's another one that's so common. I find it, I mean, it's confusing to me that it's actually noted that it's rare. This next one's really interesting. The first part of it is very interesting. So it's May, it's the word M-A-Y, but it's talking about the different usage of it, or different forms that are used in southern Appalachia or the Smoky Mountains. A past tense form is malt at this time. I mean, the dictionary's noting this, malt. I've never heard anyone say that. This form does not appear in the Great Smoky Mountains. Great Smoky Mountains, I don't know what that is. It does not appear in CSME. I'm sure it's obvious and I'm just overlooking it, but it does not appear there. According to Joseph Hall, it was only used by old people in 1937 and was not heard thereafter. So Joseph Hall was a linguist that was sent to the Smoky Mountains when the park was being formed and all that, because they tried to document some of the culture and the language. But he formed a bond with so many people. I believe he was from California, but I may be wrong. But he was not from the area. And he formed a bond that he, over the years, and they accepted him, that he continued to come back and forth and actually document things even after the park was formed. So he has a lot of research. He's gone now, of course, but the dictionary actually draws on a lot of his research. So he's saying it was only in 1937, it was only used by old people, malt, for might is what they're trying to say, and was not heard thereafter. So let's see, 1913 Cape Art, our Southern Highlanders. What malt Ewans foller for a living? What malt Ewans foller for a living? I guess he was asking what might you do for a living is how I would say it, but what might you do for a living? 1924 Rain Saddlebags. Perhaps no phrase is derided as more uncouth than malt for might, Yet here again, Spencer is our refuge. So sound he slept that naught mought him awake. So it's kind of saying you might make fun of him for it, but Spencer actually used the word too. 1937 Hall Collection, Emirates Cove, Tennessee. They might have done it. They might have done it. They might have done it. Emirates Cove, Tennessee. That might be what makes them so sour, and that was Mrs. Will Schultz. Wares Cove, Tennessee. A question said to have been asked of strangers in the past was, what might your name be? What might your name be? And that was Jim Lawson. So please, if you've ever heard an older person or someone say might for might, leave a comment. That one's fascinating. I've never heard that one at all. But the second part of it, using might, I use might a lot, combined with other modal auxiliary verbs for could and might. So, let's see. Swain County, North Carolina, 1936, Swain County, North Carolina, 2001 Montgomery file. I can get it out tomorrow, and that was a 55-year-old woman, Jefferson County, Tennessee. So I don't know why it notes Swain County and Jefferson County, but anyway, I may get it out tomorrow. May can get it out tomorrow. I would say that. That's something like I would say. I may can get to the store tomorrow, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to pick that up for you or not. So yeah, that's one that I would say. But the next one, might, first element in combination with other module auxiliary verbs to produce could might can, might could, mighta, coulda, might ought to, might should, ought to, might would. Those are all so common. And in one of my videos, I'll try to remember which one it is and link to it. I really get in depth talking about that. Those are so common. And in that video, I kind of talk about the reason why we use those. Like you might could do that. You might should do that. If I was you, I might do it this way. All those kind of trying to be encouraging or kind of tell someone what to do, but not fully just be, as we would say, braggedy or bossy and tell them and be superior acting and tell them this is how you ought to do it. We kind of ease into it by saying you might could do it this way and it would work. So the dictionary, the references it uses is, here's 1937 Hall Collection, Wares Cove, Tennessee. You might could ask somebody along the road, and that was a woman of whom Joseph Hall was asking directions. So that's something, I would say that today if somebody asked me, do you know what time such and such is going to start in Brasstown? And I can't even talk without saying it. I would say, well, you might could stop down at Clay's and ask them, and they would probably know. 1945, Holmes, Hawks, Dunn. Pony might ought to not be held to account for running after them Jarnigan girls. So he was running after those Jarnigan girls. So I would say the same thing. You might ought to cover those plants up tonight because I heard it's going to frost, even though it's almost May. There's just a ton of them. I could go on and on. 1982, Jen's Snowbird Gravy. If they'd just laid down the snake bite, might wouldn't have killed a lot of them with nothing done. Might wouldn't have. Yeah, those are just so common to me. I know I say them. I mighta coulda thought of some names. I mighta coulda helped if someone had told me they needed it. That's what I would say. Dickey and Bake, Wayfarer, this is 1988. You might could sit up a little bit if you feel like it. Yeah, it's just so common, just like, I mean, those are just the way that I would say it. You'll have to tell me if you use those might, could, should, mighta, coulda, all those. 1999, Dumas, Southern Mountain English, but the rule in the Southern Mountain region is that these combinations are quite ordinary and usual. Yes, I would agree. Even triple combinations occur, particularly with ought to, pronounced oughta, as in she might, should, oughta leave well enough alone. She might, should, oughta leave well enough alone. So that sounds totally normal to me. I talk about Appalachian language so much that you may be saying she might oughta talk about something else, but it's really hard for me to do because I'm just plumb foolish about our rich, colorful Appalachian language. It really enriches our life, the way we communicate. We communicate all the time, and why not communicate in a rich, colorful way, a real meaningful way, if you ask me. And then since I've grown up in this area, when I'm like at the doctor's office and I heard the lady saying MASH that time, or if I hear someone today say, I'm not sure about that, it looks pretty bad, you might ought to go to the doctor and see if it's okay. It just makes me feel comforted because those are the things that I've grown up hearing. Those are the things that still spring forth from my mouth. So that's just part of who we are here in Appalachia. And I'm always happy to talk about it. I hope you're happy to listen to it. I hope you're really not thinking she ought to talk about something else. She might ought to talk about something else. But I do hope you'll continue to drop back by often while I talk about Appalachia and just celebrate the wonderful culture of the whole region.